We're gonna do some Occam's razor. Oh no, not yet. I haven't done it yet. Still instinct arrogance. I'll try to be quick. Okay. There we go. Got it.
Occam's razor. The more complex an explanation is, the more evidence you need just to find it in belief space. In traditional rationality, this is often phrased misleadingly as the more complex a proposition is, the more evidence is required to argue for it. How can we measure the complexity of an explanation? How can we determine how much evidence is required? Occam's razor is often phrased as the simplest explanation that fits the facts. Robert Heinlein replied that the simplest explanation is the lady down the street is a witch. She did it. One observes that the length of an English sentence is not a good way to measure complexity and fitting the facts by merely failing to prohibit them is insufficient. Why, exactly, is the length of an English sentence a poor measure of complexity? Because when you speak a sentence aloud, you are using labels for concepts that the listener shares. The receiver has already stored the complexity in them. Suppose we abbreviated Heinlein's whole sentence as "'twa did say Osty," so that the entire explanation can be conveyed in one word better, yet we'll give it a short, arbitrary label like F-Nord. Does this reduce the complexity? No, because you have to tell the listener in advance that "'twa did say Osty" stands for "the lady down the street is a witch, she did it." Which itself is a label for some extraordinary assertions. Just because we all know what it means doesn't mean the concept is simple. An enormous bolt of electricity comes out of the sky and hits something, and the Norse tribes books say maybe a really powerful agent was angry and threw a lightning bolt. The human brain is the most complex artifact in the known universe. If anger seems simple, it's because we don't see all the neural circuitry that's implementing the emotion. Imagine trying to explain why Saturday Night Live is funny to an alien species with no sense of humor. But don't feel superior. You yourself have no sense of F-Nord. The complexity of anger, and indeed the complexity of intelligence, was glossed over by the humans who hypothesized Thor the Thunder Agent. To a human, Maxwell's equations take much longer to explain than Thor. Humans don't have a built-in vocabulary for calculus the way we have a built-in vocabulary for anger. You've got to explain your language, and the language behind the language, and the very concept of mathematics before you can start on electricity. And yet it seems that there should be some sense in which Maxwell's equations are simpler than a human brain, or Thor the Thunder Agent. There is. It's enormously easier, as it turns out, to write a computer program that simulates Maxwell's equations compared to a computer program that simulates an intelligent, emotional mind like Thor. To reduce the complexity of one system, you need less than its reduction in complexity, plus something in terms of complexity to society for reasons I explain in hiring models for systems, plus more. It has taken people the same amount of time to invent one computer program that simulates one mathematical equation compared to yet another computed program that simulates a human emotion like Thor's Thunder Agency. All in total to make them both, since we are still discussing time investment on both sides, both as individuals and society as a whole. Before anyone thought of giving artificial minds purpose instead of leaving them with empty-headed knowledge of basic statistical distributions, there weren't very many people working on inventing computer programs in order to create superintelligences. I speculate that today, there are as many computers doing work as there used to be computers doing emotional simulation in Hollywood. This is something we could figure out easily with math and see happen with our own eyes. But of course, I don't trust my ability to predict this kind of trend in real numbers. However, it does not appear that computers doing calculus, doing economic sims, doing Earth system dynamics, doing marketing for a human being, and doing surveillance cameras all across the internet are any harder than inventing the 3 separate pieces of computer software required for one very primitive computer intelligence. They appear to be no harder than it used to be to make computers run code, except now each one takes a third less effort than it used to take to program emotions on film. This makes for an extraordinarily cheap, time-capable civilization. Note that people trying to explain physics and to make the user interface on Wikipedia as complex as it used to be in order to attract content don't compare themselves to creating artificial emotional minds like Thor the Thunder Agent. Yet some scientists seem to use Occam's razor as an indicator of how difficult an explanation is, in which case they appear to think of themselves as struggling against complexity in physics. I suppose Occam's razor, like God made everything as a test of human skill and courage, says something important, but it's unclear whether Occam's razor has meaning to speak of its application to explain human experience. If humans find an ocean simpler than is justified in evidence that isn't particularly informative, the falsifiable prediction of Occam's razor should not be that we should think something is simple to determine a theory to be the simpler explanation for the current data Occam's razor. Not in an older sense. What would be useful is whether to make predictions. The entire basis for Occam's razor seems to have disappeared under a flood of confusions, because many times science described simple models without creating them or observing them, and without warning people to believe their descriptions even though there was no experiment performed to validate their assertion, such that we learned we must never declare that an idea is simple just because it seems like one. Scientists just report whatever model is simple because they are trying to be fashionable. We made some theories ungrounded and true not because of its complexity, but because of our eagerness to reduce its complexity just so the researchers could produce an opinion and add their name to that opinion. But how this simple test worked, why people ended up believing some theories more than others. Anyone should see this, shouldn't take up valuable thinking space, should make them focus on the kinds of reasoning that result in predictions or understanding in themselves, or when a classifier works better than others, ideally for decreasing or increasing some unknown cost when some condition occurs or an order in an input produces a specific output. After reading over this post, I conclude that there's a lot to add about Occam's razor. But I need more data and the topics that arise from my searching and considering. When I realize something is true but still leave too much unexplored in its consideration, my knowledge must improve along with how far the Bayesian rate of progress from observation has moved. In some cases, the book seems to help my work by saying that while it appears the entities described must be this way and thus according to some formulation, one can reason about other aspects, just by reason's usual steps, to disprove those notions as very plausible under some contexts, in light of where one puts its place in one's mental worldview.